The last time I trusted everyone in my life, a janitor's calloused hand was the only thing between me and a closed casket. He grabbed me in the basement garage, his breath coming in sharp, terrified bursts. "There's a man in your house, Mr. Drummond. Your son put him there." My son. The boy I pulled from a shelter at 3 years old. The boy I gave my name, my fortune, and apparently, my death warrant. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's story. Leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. If a janitor suddenly stopped you in a parking garage and told you someone was waiting in your house to kill you, would you believe him or keep walking? Do not forget to like and subscribe. Note: this is a fictional story with meaningful insights. The elevator doors slid open at 10:14 on a Thursday night, and the Atlanta heat hit me like a wall of wet velvet. Even in the basement garage of Peachtree Tower, the humidity crawled through 50 stories of glass and steel to remind you that summer in Georgia has no manners. I, Walter Drummond, 63 years old, chairman of Drummond Capital Partners, stepped out with my briefcase in one hand, and the weight of a 12-hour board meeting grinding into my bones like sand in a rusted hinge. My footsteps echoed against the concrete, a hollow countdown bouncing between the pillars. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with that tired insect drone that only empty buildings produce after midnight, casting jagged shadows across the hood of my sedan. The air tasted of motor oil and stale concrete dust, and somewhere above me, the ventilation system wheezed like lungs that had forgotten how to rest. I reached for my key fob, the metal cold and familiar against my fingers. Just another late night in the empire I built from a one-room office and a borrowed calculator. The only thing waiting at home was a glass of bourbon and the silence of rooms too large for one man. That was when the silence changed. Not a sound, but a subtraction. The garage air shifted as though a wall had moved closer without permission, and the hair on the back of my neck rose with the certainty that something irreversible was forming in the dark. A shadow separated itself from the concrete support beam near the ramp. My hand froze over the door handle. Hank Henderson, 66 years old, head janitor for 15 years. A man most executives walk past, like furniture with a pulse. He stood trembling in his gray coveralls, sweat darkening the collar, his eyes darting toward the black glass domes of the security cameras as though they were loaded weapons. How often do we walk past the people who will one day save our lives without ever learning the weight of their names? Before I could speak, Hank lunged. His hands gripped the lapels of my overcoat with a desperation that nearly pulled me sideways. The smell hit me. Industrial soap, menthol cigarettes, and something sharper underneath. Metallic, primal, fear in its rawest chemical form. "Mr. Drummond, please." His voice came out in a ragged whisper that cost him everything to produce. "Do not go home tonight. I have been waiting 3 hours to catch you alone." "Hank, what is this?" My voice cracked. "You are not supposed to be on this level." He leaned in until I could see the broken capillaries in his eyes and the dried salt where tears had recently run. He did not care about protocol. He did not care that he was physically restraining the man who signed his paychecks. "There is a man in your house right now." Each word landed like a separate blow. "A man your son hired. A man who kills for money. His name is Victor Salco. And he has been sitting in your living room since 8 o'clock, waiting for you to walk through that front door." The name Tyler detonated inside my chest. My son. The boy I rescued from a county shelter 30 years ago. The boy whose first word to me was Dad. The boy I built this empire to hand down to with the patience of a man constructing a cathedral he knew he would never worship in. "Tyler?" The word left me like air from a punctured tire. "Your son hired a killer, sir." Hank's voice broke on the word. "I found the contract in Mr. Cross's trash. Your lawyer, Martin Cross. He arranged everything." Martin. My attorney for 25 years. The man who stood beside me at Catherine's funeral. The man who processed Tyler's adoption with a handshake and the words, "I will always protect this family's interests." The garage contracted around me. The fluorescent lights flickered once. as if the building itself had flinched. I looked into Hank's eyes and saw not madness, but the absolute certainty of a man who had weighed his entire life against this single act and chosen to stand here anyway. "How could you possibly know this, Hank?" "Because I clean their floors, Mr. Drummond." His jaw tightened with a pride born of survival. "I empty their trash. I exist in a way that makes powerful men forget I have ears." He released my coat and stepped back, chest heaving, eyes flicking to the cameras one final time. "I have to go. If they see me here, they will know. Please, do not go home tonight." Then he was gone, swallowed into the service corridor like a ghost retreating through walls that had never acknowledged his existence. I stood alone, my hand still hovering over a door handle that now felt like the trigger of a loaded gun. The silence returned, but rearranged. It was the silence of a world that had just shown me its true architecture. I fumbled the key fob 3 times before the engine turned over, my hands shaking with a frequency I had not felt since the morning they told me Catherine's cancer was terminal. The dashboard clock glowed pale green. 10:22. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen cast a surgical blue light across the cabin, turning my reflection in the windshield into something that looked already dead. One notification. One text. Received 9:47, 35 minutes before Hank grabbed me. "Tyler. Hey, Dad. Just checking if you're home yet. Made you dinner tonight. Your favorite. Let me know when you walk in. My favorite. Bourbon glazed short ribs. A recipe Catherine taught him when he was 16. He was not asking if I was safe. He was checking whether the lamb had walked into the slaughterhouse. And the dinner he made was not food. It was bait, seasoned with 30 years of my trust." I stared at those words until the screen went dark, and the garage walls closed around me like the sides of a coffin I was never meant to climb out of. I did not drive home. I turned the steering wheel away from Buckhead and aimed the sedan toward Peachtree Road, my knuckles white against the leather, the city lights bleeding into long wet streaks through a windshield I had forgotten to wipe. Every red light felt like a trap. Every set of headlights in my mirror looked like teeth. The Ritz-Carlton Buckhead rose out of the dark like a marble tombstone. I pulled into the underground parking structure, chose a spot in the farthest corner where no camera had a clear angle, and sat for 4 full minutes with the engine running, listening to the tick of cooling metal and the percussion of my own heartbeat in my ears. I checked in under the name of a defunct holding company, paid with a secondary credit card that had no connection to Drummond Capital, and took a room on the 9th floor facing away from the street. The concierge smiled with practiced warmth. I smiled back with the mechanical precision of a man whose face had become a mask he could no longer feel. The room was cold, sterile. The sheets smelled of industrial lavender, and the air carried that specific hotel emptiness, the scent of 1,000 strangers who had passed through without leaving a single trace of themselves behind. I sat on the edge of the bed without removing my coat, pulled out my phone, and opened the security application that controlled every camera in my Buckhead home. When did the walls I built to keep the world out become the walls designed to keep me in? The feed loaded in fragments, buffering in jagged horizontal lines before resolving into the familiar geometry of my living room. And there he was. A shape that did not belong. A man sitting in my leather armchair, the one facing the front door, positioned with the patience of a predator who had calculated exactly how many seconds it would take between the sound of a key turning and the moment a 63-year-old man would be within arm's reach. Victor Salko did not move. He sat in perfect stillness. No phone, no book, no light. Just a dark mass in a darker room, his silhouette barely distinguishable from the furniture around him. The only movement was the occasional slow turn of his head toward the front door. A mechanical sweep that reminded me of the automated security cameras he had apparently rendered useless. I switched feeds. Kitchen, empty. Study, empty. Master bedroom, undisturbed. Back to the living room. Salko had not shifted an inch. The timestamp read 11:41. He had been sitting in that chair for nearly 4 hours, waiting for the sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor. My throat constricted. I tried to swallow and found only dry heat. This was not a burglary. Burglars move quickly, grab what shines, and vanish. This man was an appointment. He was a transaction, waiting to be completed. I navigated to my security system's control panel, intending to trigger the silent alarm that would bring my private armed response team within 6 minutes. My thumb hovered over the panic icon, then froze. The system status showed green across every zone. Armed, secure, normal. But beneath that reassuring display, a single line of text made my vision blur. Administrative access. Last modified. Monday, 11:22 a.m. User, M. Cross. Martin had changed the master credentials 4 days ago. My panic button would ring in his office now, not the security company's dispatch center. My armed response team had been rerouted to a dead number. The fortress I had spent $200,000 building around my life had been quietly handed to the enemy. Key by key, code by code, by the man I paid to protect me. I set the phone down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The textured plaster above me looked like a topographical map of a country I no longer recognized. Somewhere across the city, a man sat in my chair, in my house, surrounded by photographs of my family, waiting to stop my heart. And my own son had placed him there like a chess piece moved into position with the cold calculation of someone who had already decided the game was over. Is it still a home if the person who wants you dead has a key, and the person who built the locks is the one who opened them? I did not sleep. I sat in the dark, cycling through camera feeds every 11 minutes, like a man counting the breaths of a monster sleeping in his living room. At 4:51 in the morning, the shape moved. Salco rose from the chair with a fluid, unhurried grace that told me everything about who he was. No rush, no frustration. He simply stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the back door with the calm stride of a man whose work had been postponed, not canceled. He paused at the threshold, turned, looked directly into the kitchen camera, and smiled. A thin, knowing curve of the lips that said he was aware the eye was watching, and he did not care. Someone had told him the owner of that eye would never see the footage. Someone had promised him that the cameras were already blind. The back door closed. The house returned to silence. But it was not the silence of safety. It was the silence of a predator circling back to the watering hole, certain its prey would return when the thirst became unbearable. At 6:17, my phone vibrated against the nightstand. Tyler again. A phone call this time, not a text. I let it ring until voicemail caught it, then listened to the recording with the volume so low I had to press the speaker against my ear. "Hey Dad, it is Tyler. Just worried about you. You did not come home last night, and you have not answered my texts. Call me when you get this. Okay? Love you. Love you." The words landed like acid on an open wound. The same voice that once asked me to read one more bedtime story was now conducting a welfare check on a corpse that had failed to materialize. I replayed the message. Listened to the texture of his breathing between sentences. There was no tremor, no guilt, just the smooth, practiced cadence of a man who had rehearsed this exact scenario and knew precisely which words a grieving son should use when the police eventually asked to hear his last communication with the deceased. I set the phone on the cold marble of the bathroom counter and looked at my reflection. The man staring back was not the chairman of a $200 million empire. He was a 63-year-old target who had just realized that every lock, every camera, every alarm, and every trusted name in his phone had been turned into weapons aimed directly at his chest. Martin Cross. 25 years. He had the master password. He had the security codes. He had the trust documents, the insurance policies, the emergency contacts. He did not just know where the bodies were buried. He knew exactly how deep to dig the next grave. The only question that remained was whether I would call the police and hope they believed a billionaire's paranoia, or whether I would go higher. much higher. Because when the man who holds your shield is the one swinging the sword, local badges are not enough. I needed federal authority. I needed people who investigated empires, not break-ins. I needed the kind of power that does not flinch when the suspect wears a $3,000 suit and carries a bar membership. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had memorized years ago, for emergencies I prayed would never come, the FBI Atlanta field office. Because this was no longer a family matter. This was a conspiracy with a body count of one that had simply failed to arrive on schedule. I did not make the call immediately. I sat on the edge of that hotel bed, phone in hand, the FBI number glowing on the screen like a door I was not yet ready to open. Because once I opened it, the story became real. Once I spoke the words aloud. My son hired a man to kill me. They would exist in the world in a way I could never take back. And in that hesitation, my mind did what minds do when the present becomes too sharp to hold. It retreated. It crawled backward through 30 years of memories, until it found the one moment that started everything. The moment I first saw Tyler's face. November 1993. Fulton County Emergency Shelter. I was 32 years old, and 3 months into the kind of grief that makes a man forget to eat, forget to sleep, forget that his body requires more than bourbon and silence to continue functioning. Catherine had been dead since August. Ovarian cancer. 41 days from diagnosis to funeral. I buried her on a Tuesday and spent the next 12 weeks building a financial empire because building things was the only alternative to burning everything down. The shelter sat on the south side of Atlanta. A squat cinder block building that smelled of bleach and canned soup, and the particular exhaustion of people who had nowhere left to fall. I had not gone there to adopt a child. I had gone because my pastor, a man named Reverend Hollis, had asked me to deliver a donation check for the winter heating fund. A simple errand. A 30-minute detour between the office and the empty house I could not bear to enter before midnight. Grief does not ask permission before it rearranges the architecture of your life. It simply moves the walls while you are sleeping and waits for you to walk into them. The lobby was painted the color of old mustard. The linoleum peeling at the corners. The air thick with the sound of a television no one was watching. And the distant crying of children who had learned that tears changed nothing. A woman named Martha, the shelter manager, met me at the front desk with a handshake that was firmer than most of my board members and eyes that had seen enough human wreckage to fill 1,000 boardrooms. Thank you for the check, Mr. Drummond. Sometimes it helps donors to see where the money goes. I should have said no. I should have handed over the envelope and driven back to my empty house and poured 3 fingers of scotch and fallen asleep in Catherine's reading chair like I did every other night. But something in the fluorescent flicker of that lobby, something in the distant sound of small voices echoing down a hallway I could not see, pulled at a thread I did not know was loose. Martha led me through a corridor lined with doors that all looked the same, each one hiding a story I was not prepared to hear. She talked about occupancy rates and funding gaps and the bureaucratic nightmares of child protective services. I nodded. I wrote mental checks. I calculated tax deductions. I did everything a businessman does to keep the world at arm's length. Then she opened a door at the end of the hall, and everything I thought I knew about distance collapsed. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the exact moment your life split into before and after? Not with drama or thunder, but with the quiet click of a lock you did not know existed finally turning open. The room was small. A repurposed storage space, with a single window too high to see out of, and walls painted the pale blue of a sky that these children would rarely get to see from this angle. There were 4 cribs. 3 were empty. In the 4th, pushed into the corner farthest from the door, sat a boy. Tyler was 3 years old. He did not look up when we entered. He did not cry. He did not reach out his arms or make a sound. He sat with his legs crossed, a torn stuffed bear clutched against his chest, and stared at a point on the opposite wall with the 1,000-yard focus of a soldier who had seen too much combat. His skin was the color of milked coffee, his hair a mess of tight curls that no one had bothered to comb, and his eyes, when they finally lifted to meet mine, were not the eyes of a child. They were old. They were careful. They were the eyes of someone who had already learned that people leave, and that crying about it only wastes the energy you need to survive until the next meal. "This is Tyler," Martha said softly. "His mother, Denise Ward, passed 3 months ago. Overdose. She was 23. Martha paused. "He has not spoken a word since she died. Not one. The pediatric psychologist says it is a trauma response. He is waiting for someone who is not coming back." I stood in the doorway and felt something crack open inside my chest that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with recognition. I knew that stillness. I knew that silence. I knew what it felt like to sit in an empty room and wait for a voice that would never call your name again. I crouched down until my eyes were level with his. He did not flinch. He did not reach for me. He simply looked at me with those ancient, careful eyes and measured me in a way that no 3-year-old should know how to do. "Hey, buddy," I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, softer than it had been in months. "That is a good bear you have there." Nothing. Just that steady gaze. The bear clutched tighter. I did not touch him. I did not make promises. I simply sat down on the cold linoleum floor, my $2,000 suit pressing against the grime, and stayed. I stayed because Catherine would have stayed. I stayed because the silence between us felt less like emptiness and more like the beginning of a language neither of us had learned yet. "Mr. Drummond?" A voice from behind me shattered the quiet. I turned to find a young man in a navy suit, early 30s, with a smile too polished for a building that smelled of bleach and despair. "I am Martin Cross. I handle the pro bono legal work for the shelter. Martha mentioned you were visiting today." He extended his hand. His grip was warm, confident, and precisely calibrated to convey trustworthiness. "If you ever consider fostering or adoption, I would be honored to guide you through the process. No pressure, of course, but a child like Tyler deserves someone with the means to give him a real chance." I looked at Martin's smile. Then I looked back at Tyler, who had not moved, had not blinked, had not released that ragged bear by even a fraction of an inch, and I felt for the first time since Catherine's last breath the faint pulse of something that might have been purpose. I did not know then that Martin Cross had not arrived at that shelter by coincidence. I did not know that he was already handling the wrongful death settlement of Denise Ward. I did not know that $500,000 in compensation was about to be placed into a trust fund for the silent boy in the corner, a fund that Martin would spend the next 15 years draining into his own accounts like a parasite feeding on blood it had volunteered to protect. All I knew was that the boy in that crib had no one. And I had everything except a reason to keep breathing. The adoption was finalized in 19 days. Martin Cross handled everything with a speed that I mistook for competence, and a warmth that I mistook for genuine care. Papers signed, background checks cleared, home study completed. 19 days between the moment I sat on that linoleum floor and the moment I carried Tyler through the front door of my Buckhead home, his small body rigid against my chest, his fingers still locked around that torn, stuffed bear, as though it were the last fragment of a world that had already ended. He did not speak. Not the first day. Not the first week. Not through the second week of meals I cooked and books I read aloud and nights I spent sitting in the hallway outside his bedroom door, listening to the silence on the other side and wondering if I had made a terrible mistake by bringing a broken child into a broken house. The pediatric therapist told me to be patient. She said the words would come when safety became more convincing than silence. She said that for children like Tyler, speech was not communication. It was vulnerability. And vulnerability was a door he had learned to keep bolted shut because every adult who had ever walked through it had eventually walked back out. So I stopped trying to make him talk. I stopped filling the quiet with questions he was not ready to answer. Instead, I simply existed in the same rooms he existed in. I cooked breakfast and set his plate on the table without commentary. I read the newspaper in the living room while he sat on the floor with his bear, neither of us requiring anything from the other, except presence. I let the silence be the language, and I let it teach me that love does not always arrive with words. Does a father become a father on the day he signs the papers, or on the day his child decides he is safe enough to need? Day 15. A Sunday morning in December. I was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs, the smell of butter and coffee filling a house that had been empty of warmth for so long that even the walls seemed to lean toward the stove. Tyler was at the table, his bear propped against the salt shaker, his small hands wrapped around a cup of apple juice that he held like a chalice. I set the plate in front of him, turned back to the stove, and then I heard it. "Dad?" One syllable, barely louder than the hiss of the burner. A sound so small it could have been the house settling, or the wind pressing against the window, or the creak of a chair leg against hardwood. But it was not any of those things. It was a word, the first word he had spoken in over 3 months. And he had chosen it for me. I did not turn around immediately. I stood facing the stove with my hand on the spatula and felt something crack open in my chest that had been sealed since the afternoon. I watched Catherine's casket disappear into Georgia clay. When I finally turned, Tyler was looking at me with those same careful, ancient eyes. But something had shifted behind them. A door, just barely, had been pushed open from the inside. "Yeah, buddy?" My voice came out thick, barely controlled. "I am right here." He did not say anything else. He simply went back to his eggs. But from that morning forward, the word appeared like small birds landing on a wire, one at a time, then in clusters, then in whole sentences that grew longer and more trusting with each passing month. "Dad, can I have more juice?" "Dad, read this one again." "Dad, will you be here when I wake up?" That last one broke me every time. And every time, I gave him the same answer. "I will be here. Every morning. I promise you that on Catherine's name." The years that followed were not perfect. They were not the sun-drenched montage of a Hollywood adoption story. They were messy and difficult and punctuated by therapist appointments and school conferences and the particular challenges of raising a boy whose earliest memories were made of absence. But they were good. They were ours. Tyler grew tall and sharp and curious. He graduated from Morehouse with honors. He joined Drummond Capital at 24, with the hunger of a young man determined to prove that his last name was not a gift, but an earned title. I watched him become everything I had hoped. And I believed, with the arrogance of a man who thinks love is a firewall against all harm, that I had done enough. That the shelter was buried. That the silence of those first 15 days would never return. I was wrong about many things in my life. The interest rates in 2008. The merger with Callahan Freight in 2012. But nothing compares to how wrong I was about the permanence of my son's trust. Because trust, I would learn, is not a structure you build once. It is a fire you must tend every single day. And the moment you stop feeding it, someone else will come along with their own fuel and their own match and burn the whole thing to the ground. Martin Cross tended that fire for 25 years. He sat at our Thanksgiving tables. He attended Tyler's graduation. He managed our trusts and our wills and our most intimate legal architecture with the careful devotion of a man who loved us like family. And for 25 years, I never once looked beneath the devotion to see the termites eating the foundation. Is it possible to build a perfect life on a floor that someone else has been hollowing out since the very first day? I opened my eyes. The hotel ceiling returned, sterile and white and indifferent. The memory of Tyler's 3-year-old voice saying Dad dissolved into the Georgia morning light, now leaking through the curtains. I picked up my phone. The voicemail icon still pulsed. Tyler's voice from 6 hours ago, still stored in the digital amber of the device. "Hey, Dad. Just worried about you." The same word. Dad. Spoken by the same mouth. But the man behind it had become a stranger I no longer recognized. The boy who once asked if I would be there when he woke up had hired someone to make sure I never woke up again. I dialed the FBI Atlanta field office. The phone rang twice. A woman answered with the flat, professional cadence of federal authority. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Atlanta Division. "How may I direct your call?" I took one breath, then another. Then I said the words that would shatter the glass case I had built around my family for 3 decades. My name is Walter Drummond. I am the chairman of Drummond Capital Partners. Last night, my son attempted to have me murdered in my own home, and the conspiracy involves my personal attorney of 25 years. I have video evidence, and I believe this qualifies as a federal matter. I need to speak with someone in your white-collar crime division immediately. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the world began to move. The Richard B. Russell Federal Building sits on Spring Street, like a concrete fist planted in the center of Atlanta's skyline. No curves, no warmth, just vertical lines and reinforced glass designed to remind you that the institution inside does not negotiate with sentiment. I arrived at 7-Eleven on a Friday morning, still wearing Thursday's suit, with a briefcase containing my phone, a printed screenshot of the security camera footage, and 30 years of misplaced trust. The lobby smelled of cold marble and the metallic bite of security scanners. I surrendered my belt, my watch, my cufflinks, and the last remnants of the dignity that comes with being a man who has never before had to ask for help from people who carry badges. The guard looked at my creased suit and the shadows carved beneath my eyes with a polite indifference that told me billionaires were not as rare in this building as I might have assumed. I was led through a maze of fluorescent-lit corridors to the 4th floor, past rows of cubicles humming with the mechanical rhythm of keyboards and the murmur of phone conversations conducted in voices carefully calibrated to reveal nothing. The air tasted of recycled oxygen and stale government coffee, a sharp contrast to the filtered cedar of my corner office 35 stories above the city. When does a man stop being the one who gives orders and start being the one who follows them? The answer is, the exact moment someone he loves decides his heartbeat is worth less than an insurance payout. Special Agent Rachel Torres stood to greet me from behind a metal desk, stacked with files thick enough to stop a bullet. 42 years old. Dark hair pulled into a knot, so tight it looked structural. Eyes the color of black coffee, the kind that had been reheated too many times and become something sharper in the process. She wore no jewelry except a watch with a cracked face, and her handshake carried the precise calibrated pressure of a woman who had spent 2 decades measuring the weight of men's lies. Mr. Drummond. Her voice was flat, clinical, stripped of any inflection that might suggest sympathy or disbelief. I understand you have a complicated morning. Sit down. Start from the parking garage. I told her everything. Hank's warning. Salco's silhouette in my living room. The compromised security system. Martin's administrative access change. Tyler's voicemail. End of, end of, end. I laid each fact on her desk, like a card in a hand of poker I had never wanted to play, watching her face for the flinch, the raised eyebrow, the subtle shift that would tell me she thought I was paranoid or delusional, or simply a rich man inventing drama. The flinch never came. Instead, something else happened. Something that turned the ice in my veins to stone. Torres opened a drawer, pulled out a manila folder, and slid it across the desk. The paper whispered against the metal surface like a secret, finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. Martin Cross has been on our radar for 8 months, Mr. Drummond. She tapped the folder with one short, unpolished fingernail. Suspected money laundering through client trust accounts. 3 separate shell companies registered in Delaware. We could not get close enough to build a case because his client list reads like a who's who of Atlanta philanthropy. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine with a precision that felt almost surgical. Your arrival this morning is not a surprise to us. It is a confirmation. I opened the folder. Inside was a surveillance photograph taken from across a parking lot, grainy and overexposed, showing Martin Cross shaking hands with a man I did not recognize outside a restaurant in Macon. The timestamp was 6 weeks old. Who is that? I asked, pointing to the stranger. Demetrius Kane. He runs the largest unlicensed gambling operation in central Georgia. High-stakes poker, sports books, Private card rooms in the back of restaurants that serve food no one orders. Torres leaned back in her chair, the springs protesting with a dry metallic squeal. Your son owes Kane's organization $2.3 million. The number landed in my stomach like a swallowed stone. $2.3 million. I had given Tyler a salary of $350,000 a year. I had given him a car, a condominium, a trust fund distribution every birthday. How does a man earning that kind of money manage to bury himself in a hole nearly 7 times his annual income? Gambling? My voice came out hollow. Since when? 18 months. That is when the first wire transfers appear. Torres pulled up a timeline on her monitor. The blue light, casting her face in cold geometric shadows. Mr. Drummond, your son did not stumble into this addiction by accident. He was introduced to Kane's operation by a third party, someone who knew exactly which doors to open and exactly how deep the hole needed to be before your son would agree to anything. Martin, I said. The name tasted like copper. Martin. Torres confirmed with a single nod. Cross introduced your son to a private poker game 18 months ago, under the guise of networking with potential investors. Within 3 months, Tyler was in for $200,000. By 6 months, it was over $1 million. Cross was simultaneously lending him cash through a shell company called Meridian Advisory, creating a financial dependency that made Tyler completely controllable. Is it possible for a man to build a cage around someone he once called nephew without that person ever hearing the door lock shut? Torres stood and walked to a whiteboard mounted on the far wall, already covered in red lines and circled names that I was only beginning to recognize as the anatomy of my family's destruction. She uncapped a marker and drew a fresh line between Martin's name and a box labeled Drummond Family Trust, established 1993. Here is what does not fit, she said, turning to face me with an expression that had shifted from clinical to something approaching genuine concern. Tyler's gambling debts started 18 months ago, but Martin Cross has been moving money out of your family's trust accounts for over a decade. Small amounts. Never enough to trigger an audit. Always filed under legitimate legal fees or administrative costs. She tapped the whiteboard twice. We are talking about a slow, methodical extraction that predates your son's troubles by years. My mouth went dry. How much? We are still calculating. But the preliminary estimate exceeds $500,000 from a single dormant account. She set the marker down and crossed her arms. A trust fund established in 1993 for a minor named Tyler Drummond. Original deposit, $500,000 from a wrongful death settlement. Current balance, as of last audit, 0. The room tilted. The fluorescent lights above seemed to pulse with a frequency that made my vision swim. $500,000. Tyler's money. The settlement from Denise Ward's death in that shelter. Money that was supposed to be Tyler's safety net. His inheritance from a mother who had nothing else to leave behind. Martin stole Tyler's money. I whispered, the words barely making it past my lips. For 15 years, Torres confirmed. And when Tyler started asking questions about his inheritance around 2022, Martin did not provide answers. He provided a poker table. The architecture of the betrayal was so elegant, so patient, so surgically precise that I almost admired it before the rage arrived. Martin had stolen Tyler's future, then manufactured the desperation that made Tyler willing to destroy mine. My son was not the architect of this conspiracy. He was the building material. There is a clock on this, Mr. Drummond. Torres's voice pulled me back from the edge. Kane's organization has given Tyler until Sunday night to produce payment. That is 72 hours from now. If Tyler fails, they will not send lawyers. They will send the same kind of man who was sitting in your living room last night. She leaned forward, her palms flat on the desk. Your son did not just want you dead. He needed you dead by Friday. Because your $8 million life insurance policy is the only currency he has left to buy his own survival. Torres turned her monitor toward me. The screen glowed with the cold blue precision of a spreadsheet that read like an autopsy report for my son's integrity. Each row was a transaction. Each column was a date. And each number was a step in a descent so calculated, so carefully engineered, that it could not have been gravity alone that pulled him down. 18 months, Torres said, her finger tracing the first entry. March of 2023. A wire transfer of $5,000 to an entity called Peach State Consulting. That is Kane's front operation. The poker games happen above a barbecue restaurant on Vineville Avenue in Macon, in a room that officially does not exist. $5,000. The price of a first taste. The amount a man earning $350,000 a year would barely notice missing from his accounts. I stared at the number and recognized the technique immediately, because I had seen it before in hostile business acquisitions. You do not take the company in one move. You take a sliver, then another sliver, then another, until the owner wakes up one morning and discovers he is standing in a building that no longer belongs to him. Martin introduced him at a private dinner, Torres continued, scrolling down to a cluster of transactions in April and May. Told Tyler it was a networking event for high-net-worth investors, the kind of room where deals get made over cards and bourbon. Tyler went because his mentor told him to go. Mentor. The word landed like a slap. Martin had been Tyler's mentor since he was 16 years old. The man who taught him to read contracts. The man who took him to his first client dinner. The man who sat beside him at every milestone from graduation to his first board presentation and whispered, "You are ready for this." Of course, Tyler followed him into that room. He would have followed Martin into a furnace if Martin had told him the fire was a shortcut to success. Can a man be both architect and arsonist of the same life, building it with one hand while soaking the foundation in kerosene with the other? By June, Torres said, Tyler was in for $75,000. By September, $200,000. He started selling personal assets. The Porsche went first, then a real estate stake in Midtown. She highlighted a line on the screen. This is where it shifts from recreation to addiction. October 2023. He borrowed $150,000 from Meridian Advisory. That is Martin's shell company. I leaned forward, my elbows pressed against the cold metal edge of her desk. Tyler borrowed from Martin at 14% interest, compounding monthly. Torres's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Your son thought he was borrowing from a private equity contact, Martin introduced. He did not know Meridian was Martin. The paperwork was designed to look like a third-party institutional loan. She pulled up a corporate registration document. Meridian Advisory, incorporated in Delaware. Sole beneficial owner, Martin J. Cross. The precision of it sickened me. Martin had not simply enabled Tyler's gambling. He had engineered a financial dependency so complete that by the time Tyler realized he was drowning, the only hand reaching down belonged to the man holding his head underwater. The lending accelerated in 2024, Torres said. $50,000 a month transferred from Meridian to Tyler's personal account. Each loan came with conditions. Martin required Tyler to attend specific games, at specific stakes, in specific rooms run by Kane's people. She paused. He was not helping your son stay afloat, Mr. Drummond. He was making sure your son sank in the exact right direction. I thought of Tyler at Thanksgiving last year. He had seemed distracted, thinner, his laugh arriving a half-second too late, as though he was running each social interaction through a filter of calculation before releasing it. I had asked if he was all right. He had smiled that smile I knew better than my own reflection and said, "Just busy, Dad. The firm keeps me running." And I had believed him because believing him was easier than the alternative. How many lies did I accept because the truth would have required me to look closer at the people I had already decided to trust? Torres clicked to a new screen. An email thread, extracted from Martin's server under the federal warrant that had been quietly building for 8 months. The header showed a message sent from Martin Cross to an encrypted address associated with Demetrius Kane's network, dated January of this year. Torres read it aloud, her voice flat and deliberate. The kid is ready. He is in for 2.1 and climbing. No way out but through the old man. Time to present the solution. He will agree to anything now. Make sure your man Salco is available for a consultation within 6 weeks. I heard the words. I understood their meaning. But my body rejected them, the way a transplant patient rejects a foreign organ. The kid is ready, as though my son were a crop that had been watered and sunned and cultivated to the precise moment of harvest, as though 34 years of his life had been nothing but preparation for this single transaction. He manufactured this, I said, my voice coming from somewhere distant and unfamiliar. Martin did not just take advantage of Tyler's weakness. He created the weakness. Systematically, Torres confirmed. Over 18 months, with the patience of a man who had been planning this for much longer. She stood and walked to the whiteboard, drawing a red circle around the trust fund box. And here is why. Tyler started asking about his inheritance in 2022. He found a reference to the Denise Ward wrongful death settlement in some old paperwork and called Martin to inquire about the trust fund. What did Martin tell him? He told Tyler the fund had been depleted by administrative and legal fees over the years. Standard trust erosion, he called it. Tyler accepted that answer. Torres turned to face me, but Martin knew it was only a matter of time before Tyler hired his own accountant or mentioned it to you. So he needed Tyler distracted. Completely. Permanently. The timeline crystallized in my mind with a terrible clarity. Martin steals Tyler's $500,000. Tyler starts asking questions. In 2022, Martin introduces Tyler to high-stakes poker in 2023. Tyler spirals into debt. Martin lends money through a hidden company, creating total financial dependency. Tyler becomes desperate enough to agree to anything. Martin presents the solution. Kill your father. Collect $8 million in insurance. Clear all debts. My son was not a conspirator. He was a product, assembled over 18 months from desperation and manufactured loyalty, and the carefully cultivated belief that his father's death was the only exit from a room Martin had locked from the outside. He was going to frame Tyler for everything, I said. The understanding, arriving like a cold blade pressed against my sternum. If this had worked, Tyler would have collected the insurance, paid Kane, and Martin would have disappeared. Torres finished. We found a passport application under a false identity submitted 3 months ago, and a one-way ticket to Grand Cayman purchased last week. Departure date: this Saturday. Tomorrow. Martin was planning to vanish in less than 36 hours, leaving Tyler holding the murder weapon and the motive and every piece of evidence that would bury him for life. Your son was never the endgame, Mr. Drummond. Torres's voice carried the cold weight of a verdict. He was the exit strategy. Martin needed someone desperate enough to pull the trigger, and disposable enough to take the fall when the smoke cleared. I looked at the spreadsheet still glowing on the screen. Every number a link in a chain wrapped around my son's throat. Every transaction a step in a 25-year con that had finally reached its endgame. And at the center of it all, Martin Cross, the man who had smiled at my Thanksgiving table and carved the turkey with the same hands that were carving my family into pieces. To save my own life, I first had to understand that my son was not my enemy. He was the hostage. And the ransom was everything I had ever built. Torres asked the question while refilling her coffee from a pot that looked like it had not been washed since the previous administration. The janitor, she said, settling back into her chair. Hank Henderson, 66. Head of custodial services, 15 years. No record. Widower. Vietnam veteran. 2 tours. She set down her mug with a deliberate clink. Why would a man like that risk his pension and his safety to warn someone who probably does not know his middle name? I looked at the floor. The gray carpet blurred beneath my gaze. As the answer rose, from a place I had not visited in a decade. Because 10 years ago, I sat on a basement floor at 2 in the morning and told him his life still mattered. Torres waited. She did not prompt. She let the silence work. March 2014. 2:17 in the morning. I was in my office on the 35th floor. Buried in quarterly projections, I needed a file from the archive storage in the basement, a mundane errand through service corridors most executives never see. The basement of Peachtree Tower is raw infrastructure, exposed pipes, humming electrical panels, the thick smell of machine oil, and the particular loneliness of spaces designed to be functional rather than inhabited. I heard it before I saw it. A metallic sound. Small. Precise. The unmistakable click of a revolver cylinder being checked and closed. There are sounds that bypass the brain entirely and speak directly to the animal hiding beneath decades of boardroom composure. That click was one of them. I found Hank Henderson sitting on the concrete floor behind the main electrical panel, his back against the cinderblock wall, a service revolver resting in his lap with the casual intimacy of an old friend come to collect a final debt. His coveralls were clean, his shoes polished, his face dry. He had the absolute stillness of a man who had already made his decision and was simply waiting for the courage to execute it. What does courage look like in a man who survived 2 tours in the Mekong Delta, only to discover that the enemy he could never kill was living inside his own skull? Hank. I said his name softly. Not a question. Not a command. Just an acknowledgement that someone in this building at 2 in the morning saw him. His eyes moved toward me. Empty. The same hollow vacancy I had seen in Tyler's eyes at 3 years old. The look of someone who has concluded the world will continue without them and possibly function better for it. My wife died 6 months ago, he said, his voice flat, factual. Cancer. Same thing took your lady, but you had money and doctors. I had a VA hospital that put her on a waiting list for treatment she needed yesterday. He looked at the revolver. The bills are going to take the house. And I am too tired, Mr. Drummond. I am 66 years old, and too tired to keep cleaning up after people who do not see me. I did not reach for the gun. I did not call security. I did not deliver a speech about the value of life from the altitude of a man who has never worried about a medical bill. I sat down. The concrete was cold through my suit pants. The electrical panel hummed against my spine. I sat 3 feet from a man with a loaded weapon and said nothing for what felt like an eternity. Then I spoke. Not as his employer, as a man who had watched monitors go flat and felt the same emptiness now radiating from Hank's body, like heat from a dying engine. I lost Catherine in '93, 21 years ago, and I still reach for her side of the bed some mornings. The hand goes out before the brain remembers. And every time, that half-second of forgetting is worse than the funeral. Hank's fingers moved away from the revolver. Not much. An inch. But enough. Nobody warned me about the mornings, he whispered. They tell you about the nights, but it is the mornings that kill you. Waking up and having that 1 second where everything is still okay. Then remembering. Yeah, I said. The mornings. Does a life saved in silence carry more weight than one saved with sirens, or do we only notice the rescues that make noise? We sat in the basement dark, 2 widowers in a building too large for one heartbeat, and let the silence be its own kind of answer. After a long while, I extended my hand. Palm up. Open. Not demanding the weapon, but offering an alternative to holding it. Hank looked at my hand, then at the revolver, then placed the gun in my palm with the care of a man releasing something sacred. I drove him to the VA hospital on Claremont Road myself. No ambulance, no records, no systems deciding his fate without consent. I arranged a private 2-year PTSD program through a board contact at Emory Healthcare, paid every bill, every session, every medication. Told no one. Not Tyler. Not Martin. Because Hank did not need a savior with a press release. He needed someone to sit on cold concrete and say, I know. From that night forward, I left a pack of menthol cigarettes on his supply closet shelf every Monday morning. He never mentioned it. I never mentioned it. It was our language. A weekly confirmation that someone in that building saw him as a man, not furniture. So that is why, I told Torres. Hank saved my life. Because 10 years ago, I saved his. Not with money. With presence. Torres studied me. Something shifted behind her professional mask. A crack of respect that closed as quickly as it appeared. That explains the loyalty, she said. But not the timing. Her phone buzzed. She read the screen, and her expression hardened into cold urgency. We just pinged Victor Salco's phone. He is not at your house. He is not in Macon. She looked up. He is 3 blocks from Hank Henderson's apartment in Decatur. The blood left my face. He knows. He knows someone warned you. And the janitor is the only person with after-hours access to Martin's floor. Torres was already reaching for her jacket. Salco is not hiding, Mr. Drummond. He is hunting, and your janitor just became the only loose thread he needs to cut before this entire conspiracy goes dark. I was on my feet before she finished the sentence. The man who saved my life 10 years ago had just saved it again last night. And now the debt was compounding with a currency that no amount of money could cover. Torres dispatched a 2-car team to Decatur before I finished standing. Within 14 minutes, confirmation arrived. Hank Henderson was secure, extracted through the service entrance of his apartment, and en route to a federal safe house. Salco's phone had gone dark 2 blocks from Hank's building, which meant the hitman had either spotted the federal vehicles and retreated, or ditched the device entirely and was now operating blind. He will surface, Torres said, with the certainty of someone who had spent years watching predators circle. Men like Salco do not abandon contracts. They recalculate. The relief lasted only seconds before Torres turned to the wall behind her desk and pulled down a rolled canvas pinned above the filing cabinet. She spread it across the conference table. It was not a map. It was a timeline, a 25-year diagram of my family's destruction, rendered in red marker and connected by lines so precise they looked like the circulatory system of a living organism. I have been building this for 8 months, she said, pinning the corners flat. But until this morning, I did not have the center. She tapped the leftmost point. Now I do. The timeline began in 1993. Fulton County Shelter. A circle around Martin Cross's name with a single notation. Wrongful death settlement. Denise Ward. Award, $500,000. Trustee. Appointed. M. Cross. Denise Ward died from a carbon monoxide leak caused by a malfunctioning heating system, Torres explained. The shelter's insurance settled for $500,000, designated for her surviving child. Martin volunteered as pro bono counsel, which gave him access to the settlement. He appointed himself trustee before you signed the adoption papers. Is it possible to be robbed on the same day you are rescued and never know until the thief decides he wants more? From 1995 to 2010, Martin extracted the fund in increments, never more than $40,000 annually. Filed as administrative expenses, legal fees, investment management costs, she pointed to the final entries. By 2010, the account was empty. $500,000. Gone. I stared at the red lines and felt the grinding rotation of a machine I never knew existed. For 15 years, Martin fed on Tyler's inheritance, while I stood beside him signing documents, trusting his smile, never looking beneath the devotion to see the parasite. 2022. Torres continued. Tyler calls Martin, asking about a trust fund his mother left. Martin tells him the fund was depleted by standard fees. Tyler accepts. She drew a sharp line to the next cluster. But Martin panicked. He knew Tyler might mention it to you. He needed Tyler's attention elsewhere. Permanently. The line terminated at March 2023. First poker game. Macon. Seeing isolated facts connected on a physical timeline transformed them into architecture. Martin had not improvised. He had constructed a cathedral of manipulation, with the patience of a man who understood that the greatest thefts take a lifetime to complete. 2024. Tyler is $2.3 million in debt. Kane's organization threatening violence. Martin presents the solution. Torres tapped a transcript pinned to the bottom. Federal wiretap. 11 days ago. She pressed play. The voice was unmistakable. I had heard it across 1,000 boardroom tables, at 100 holiday dinners, in the quiet confidence of legal advice delivered over expensive wine. By Friday, the old man is gone. The kid takes the fall. Insurance pays out. Kane gets his money. And I disappear with 25 years of interest. Everyone wins, except the two people who were never supposed to win in the first place. 25 years of interest. The phrase hung like smoke from a fire, burning underground since the day I signed Tyler's adoption papers. Martin had not joined this conspiracy. He had authored it from the moment he shook my hand in that shelter. He was never my friend, I said. The words felt like stones pulled from my throat. Not for a single day. No. Torres confirmed. He was an investor. And you were the asset he was waiting to liquidate. How do you mourn a friendship that never existed? Do you grieve for the man you thought he was? Or accept that you have been speaking to a mask for a quarter century? Torres unpinned the transcript and placed it in an evidence sleeve. The wiretap captures him discussing an exit strategy with a contact in Grand Cayman. False identity. Offshore accounts, seeded over 3 years. Property in Georgetown under a shell corporation. She met my eyes. His flight is tomorrow. Saturday. 6:45 a.m. from Hartsfield, Jackson. If we do not move tonight, he vanishes by sunrise. And Tyler? Tyler stays behind, holding the weapon, holding the motive, holding every piece of evidence pointing to him and away from Martin. Torres folded her arms. Your son was designed to be the only suspect. Martin built the case against Tyler while building the escape for himself. I looked at the timeline. Every red line a year of my life. Every circle a moment I missed. Every connection a thread I should have pulled but never did. Because I trusted the man holding the scissors. What do? We bring Hank in for a formal statement. Secure his physical evidence. Set a trap that closes before 6:45 tomorrow morning. She paused. But I need one more thing from you. Namit, I need you to walk into that building tomorrow morning and look Martin Cross in the eye without flinching. I need you to wear a wire, and I need you to give him enough rope to hang himself before he reaches that airport gate. The request settled on my shoulders like a yoke of cold iron. Tomorrow morning, I would sit across from a man who had been consuming my family for 25 years. I would shake his hand. I would drink his coffee. I would ask about his weekend plans, knowing that those plans included watching my son go to prison for a murder Martin had designed, funded, and scheduled like a board meeting. And I would smile. Because the empire I built was not made of glass and steel. It was made of patience. And for the first time in 25 years, my patience was aimed at the right target. Before dawn on Friday, a federal courier delivered 2 items from Hank's safe house to Torres's desk. The first was a pocket-sized spiral notebook, its cover warped with age and its pages filled with the tight, disciplined handwriting of a man trained by the United States Army to record what he observed without interpretation or embellishment. Dates, times, fragments of overheard conversations, 6 months of intelligence gathered by a janitor who understood that in a building full of powerful men, the only real weapon available to the invisible is information. The second item was a USB drive recovered from Martin Cross's office shredder. Hank had found it 3 days before the fire night, jammed in the machine's teeth after Martin had fed it carelessly and left without checking. The drive contained a single encrypted spreadsheet that Torres's forensic team cracked within the hour. It was the complete accounting of the Denise Ward Trust Fund. Every withdrawal, every fabricated invoice, every dollar routed through shell companies back into Martin's personal accounts over 15 years. The digital bones of my son's stolen inheritance, laid bare in columns so neat They looked like a confession written in arithmetic. Is it still theft if the victim never knew they owned anything worth stealing? Torres briefed me at 6 a.m. By 6:30, I was wearing a recording device the size of a shirt button, sewn into the inner lining of my jacket by a technician whose hands moved with the speed and precision of a surgeon. The microphone was omnidirectional, designed to capture every whisper within a 12-foot radius. The transmitter fed directly to a van parked 3 blocks from Peachtree Tower, where Torres and 2 agents would be listening in real time. "Do not push him," Torres instructed, adjusting the device one final time. "Do not accuse. Do not confront. Just be present. Be the man he expects you to be. Shaken, confused, vulnerable. Let him fill the silence with his own lies. People like Martin cannot resist explaining how safe you are when they are the ones holding the blade." I nodded. My hands were steady. The fear from Thursday night had calcified into something colder, something with edges. I was not walking into that building as a victim. I was walking in as bait, with teeth. The lobby of Peachtree Tower at 7:45 on a Friday morning smelled of fresh lilies and espresso, and the particular optimism of people who believe their routines will protect them from catastrophe. The receptionist looked up with gentle eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Drummond. We heard about the break-in attempt at your home. Are you all right?" Word travels in buildings the way water finds cracks. I had expected this. Torres had prepared a cover story, leaked through the building's security team. A failed home invasion. Nothing taken. Owner unharmed. The kind of story that generates sympathy without suspicion. "Shaken," I replied, letting my voice carry a tremor I no longer had to manufacture. But standing, the elevator delivered me to the 35th floor, and there he was. Martin Cross, standing in the hallway outside the executive suite with 2 cups of coffee, his face arranged in an expression of concern so perfectly calibrated that I wanted to applaud the craftsmanship. His charcoal suit was pressed to razor lines. His silver cufflinks caught the morning light. His eyes performed worry, the way a stage actor performs grief. Technically flawless, but empty at the center. "Walt." He set one coffee down and gripped my shoulder with both hands. The universal gesture of a man claiming intimacy he has not earned. "Thank God. Tyler called me last night frantic. Said you never came home." We were terrified. We. As though they were a unified front of concern, rather than co-conspirators checking their ledger. "I am fine, Martin." I accepted the coffee. The warmth of the cup against my cold fingers felt like holding a live grenade. Spent the night at Emory ER. Chest pains. False alarm. But they kept me for observation. His pupils dilated. A micro-expression, barely a flicker, but I caught it because I was looking for it the way a hunter watches for the twitch of grass that reveals the predator beneath. Chest pains. Heart trouble. I could almost hear the gears turning behind his composed exterior. A new narrative forming. A cleaner death. Medical history. As a foundation for a coronary event, no one would question. "You need to rest," Martin said, steering me toward my office with a hand on my lower back that felt less like guidance and more like measurement. "Let me handle the board today. You focus on recovery. How do you drink coffee with a man who is mentally calculating the dosage required to make your heart stop while smiling about your weekend plans?" We sat in my office. The morning sun caught the mahogany desk and the framed photographs on the credenza. Tyler's graduation, Catherine's portrait. Martin's face appeared in at least 4 of those photographs, always positioned at the edge of the frame, always smiling, always present in the architecture of my memories like a watermark on counterfeit currency. I let the silence build. Then I placed my cup down and said, as casually as I could manage, "I have been thinking about Tyler's inheritance lately. His mother's settlement, the trust fund from '93. Do you remember the details on that, Martin?" The change was instantaneous. His hand, reaching for his own cup, hesitated in midair for exactly 1.5 seconds. When it completed the motion, the coffee rippled against the porcelain with a tremor he could not suppress. A single drop escaped the rim and landed on his silk tie, spreading like a dark bloom. The ward settlement? His voice maintained its composure, but the pitch had risen by a fraction. That was decades ago, Walt. Standard trust erosion. Legal fees. Management costs. I can pull the file if you need a refresher. No rush, I said. Just thinking about loose ends. Getting older makes a man want things tidy. Martin smiled. The smile of a man standing on a trapdoor he does not yet realize has been unbolted from below. I will take care of it. I always take care of everything. I left his office 12 minutes later. The wire had captured every word, every pause, every tremor in his voice when the name Denise Ward entered the air like a ghost he thought he had buried 30 years ago. I was in the elevator when Torres's voice came through my earpiece, barely audible above the mechanical hum of the descending car. We got it. Stay moving. Get out of the building. But the real prize came 47 seconds after I cleared the lobby. Torres's surveillance team, positioned in the hallway outside Martin's office, captured him through the glass partition, reaching for his phone with hands that were no longer steady. The call lasted 9 seconds. The recording was crystal clear. Change of plans. Tonight. Do not wait for him to come home. Find him wherever he is. And make it look medical. Chest pains. He already told everyone he had chest pains. Use that. Martin Cross had just upgraded my death from staged break-in to simulated heart attack. And he had done it on a federal wire. With 3 agents listening. 47 seconds after I walked out of his office. The trap was set. The clock showed 11 hours until the sting. And somewhere in this city, Victor Salco was receiving new orders to kill a man whose heart was supposed to fail before midnight. The afternoon bled into preparation. Torres commandeered a conference room on the 4th floor of the federal building and transformed it into a tactical operations center within 2 hours. Whiteboards lined the walls, covered in entry points, exit routes, agent positions, and communication frequencies. The air tasted of dry erase markers and cold determination. At 2:15, Torres patched Hank Henderson in from the safe house on a secure line. His voice came through the conference speaker with the gravel of a man who had not slept in 36 hours, but whose mind remained as disciplined as the day he shipped out of Fort Benning in 1967. Tell them what you told me this morning, Torres said. Everything you heard. Start from 6 months ago. Hank cleared his throat. The sound of a chair creaking beneath him carried through the line. And I imagined him, sitting upright, the way soldiers sit. Spine straight, shoulders square, delivering a field report to commanding officers who needed every detail rendered without embellishment. June of this year, Hank began. I was cleaning the 35th floor after hours, around 11 p.m. Most nights I have the executive level to myself. But Mr. Cross was still in his office. Door closed. I could hear him talking through the wall while I cleaned the hallway outside. He paused. The pause of a man choosing his words with the same precision he once used to choose his steps through rice paddies. He said, "The kid is in too deep now. No way out but through the old man." I did not know what it meant. Not then. But it did not sound like legal advice. It sounded like planning. Did you document it? Torres asked. Date, time, and words. In my notebook. Same as every other night. Something did not sit right. His voice carried a quiet pride. Army taught me that. If it feels wrong, write it down. Because memory lies, but ink does not. When does a habit learned in a jungle 40 years ago become the instrument that saves a man's life in a skyscraper? Hank continued. August. He heard Martin discussing entry points and time windows with a voice he did not recognize. September. Martin mentioned the insurance 3 times in one call, always followed by laughter that sounded rehearsed. October. A name appeared. Salco. Martin said it twice, once followed by professional and once followed by clean. And then 3 days before Thursday night, Hank said, I found the fax. In his recycling bin. It was torn in half, but not well enough. I taped it together in the janitor's closet at midnight. He paused. It was a contract, payment terms for a service. The service was described as residential consultation and permanent resolution. The client name was Tyler Drummond. The provider was listed as V. Salco, permanent resolution. The corporate sanitization of murder, wrapped in language designed to pass as paperwork if anyone ever glanced at it without context. I felt my jaw tighten until my molars ached. "Why did you wait until Thursday night?" Torres asked. The question was not accusatory. It was procedural. "Because I am a janitor, ma'am." Hank's voice carried the weight of a truth he had lived with for decades. "Nobody in that building knows my last name. I reported a broken elevator once, and it took maintenance 6 weeks to respond. If I had walked into Mr. Drummond's office with a taped-together fax and a theory, what would have happened? Security would have escorted me out. Mr. Cross would have known within the hour, and I would have been dead by morning." He let the silence hold for 3 seconds. I needed Mr. Drummond alive to hear me. That was the only path that ended with both of us breathing. So I waited in that garage until he was alone, and I used the only currency a janitor has. Proximity. Torres nodded, though Hank could not see it. "Your testimony and physical evidence will be critical in the federal case, Mr. Henderson. You will be protected." "I do not need protection," Hank said quietly. "I need Mr. Drummond to walk out of tonight alive. That is my protection." The line went silent. Torres disconnected and turned to the room. 6 agents sat around the conference table, each reviewing their assigned position for the evening operation. At the head of the table sat Agent Derek Coleman, 38, 6'1", the same approximate build as me, with the practiced stillness of a man trained to become someone else on command. "Coleman enters the Buckhead residence at 7:30, Torres said, pointing to a floor plan projected on the wall screen. "He will be wearing Drummond's clothing, using Drummond's vehicle, following Drummond's typical Friday evening routine." She tapped the master bedroom. "By 8 p.m., Coleman will be in the master bedroom with the lights dimmed. The house will appear occupied by a single, 63-year-old man settling in for the night." She circled 12 points on the floor plan in red. "Cameras here, here, here. 8 audio units, positioned to capture any conversation within the residence. Every room covered. Every angle recorded. When Salco enters, we will have him on federal surveillance from the moment he crosses the threshold." Torres turned to me. "Your position will be in the surveillance van on Habersham Road, 200 meters from the front entrance. You will have real-time visual and audio feeds." She paused, and something in her professional mask softened by a single degree. "Tyler will come, Mr. Drummond. The pattern from Thursday shows he arrives after Salco is in position. He will enter the house, as though checking on you. He will coordinate the timing in person." I said nothing. I already knew Tyler would come. I knew he would bring soup or bourbon or some other offering wrapped in the language of filial love. And I knew that somewhere beneath the performance, buried under 18 months of Martin's poison and $2.3 million of manufactured desperation, there was still the boy who said "Dad" on a Sunday morning in December and meant it. "I want to be the first thing he sees when the lights come on," I said. Torres studied me for a long moment. Her black coffee eyes measured something behind my words that went beyond operational logistics. "That can be arranged," she said. "But I need you to understand what you are asking. You are asking to watch your son walk into your house believing you are asleep and instruct a man to end your life. You will hear his voice giving that order in real time." She leaned forward. "Are you certain you want to see what your son looks like when he believes his father is already dead?" I thought of Tyler at 3 years old, clutching that bear, silent for 15 days. I thought of him at 16, standing in the kitchen learning Catherine's recipe. I thought of him at 24, his first day at the firm, nervous in a suit that was slightly too large, because he had not yet grown into the man he was trying to become. "I need to see it," I said. Because after tonight, I need to decide whether the man in that house is my son or a stranger wearing his face. And I cannot make that decision from a distance. Torres nodded once. Then she turned back to the room and said the words that set the machinery of justice into its final rotation. Operation confirmed. All units deploy at 1900 hours. We go live at 2000. No mistakes. No second chances. This closes tonight. The surveillance van smelled of ozone, hot circuit boards, and the acrid chemical sharpness of electronics running at maximum capacity in a confined space. I sat on a low metal bench facing 6 monitors arranged in a grid, each one showing a different angle of the house I had lived in for 23 years. The house where Tyler took his first steps on the hardwood of the living room. The house where I taught him to tie a necktie in the upstairs bathroom mirror. The house that was now a stage set for my own murder. 7:58 p.m. Agent Coleman's vehicle pulled into the driveway of the Buckhead Colonial, the headlights sweeping across the ancient live oaks that flanked the front walk. He was wearing my charcoal cardigan, my reading glasses perched on his nose, carrying a briefcase I had emptied of everything except a hardcover novel and a tumbler of amber liquid that was actually apple juice. From a distance, from a camera feed, from the perspective of a man watching through binoculars across the street, he was me. Tired. Arriving home late on a Friday. Ready for bourbon and silence. Coleman entered through the front door. The feed showed him moving through the foyer with the practiced ease of someone who had studied the home's layout for 6 hours. Kitchen light on, then off. Study lamp on for 4 minutes. Then off. The choreography of a man winding down. By 8:20, the master bedroom light was the only glow visible from the street. By 8:30, even that dimmed to the soft blue flicker of a television left on for company. Torres sat beside me in the van, her headset clamped over one ear, the other ear free to monitor the radio chatter of 12 agents positioned in a perimeter around the property. Her breathing was steady, mechanical, the measured rhythm of someone who had conducted enough operations to know that the waiting was always worse than the execution. All units confirm ready, she murmured into her mic. The responses came back in clipped syllables. Ready. 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 12 voices forming a net that was about to close around 2 men who believed they were the predators in this story. How many fathers have sat in a windowless van, watching the front door of their own home, praying that their son does not walk through it? 8:51. Movement on camera 6. The rear exterior feed. A shape materialized from the tree line at the back of the property, moving with the liquid, unhurried precision of a man who had entered buildings uninvited many times before. Victor Salco. Dark clothing. Gloves. No weapon visible. But the set of his shoulders and the controlled placement of his feet told me everything about the weight he carried beneath his jacket. He reached the back door. Paused. Tested the handle. It turned without resistance. Martin's remote override. Still active. Still holding the locks open like a butler holding the door. For a guest of honor. Salco slipped inside with the silence of smoke entering a room through a crack in the window frame. Camera 3. Kitchen. He moved through the darkness without touching the walls, without disturbing the air, navigating furniture he had clearly memorized from a previous visit. Thursday night. He had been here Thursday. Sitting in my chair, learning the geometry of the kill zone. This was not his first rehearsal. This was the performance. Camera 2. Living room. He paused at the base of the stairs, head tilted, listening. The television's blue glow from the master bedroom above painted faint shadows on the ceiling of the stairwell. Salco nodded to himself. Then he began to climb. My hands gripped the edge of the metal bench so hard that the rivets dug into my palms. The monitor showed him ascending, step by deliberate step. The staircase I had walked 10,000 times now being used as a corridor to my execution. Torres placed her hand on my arm. A brief, firm pressure that said stay still without requiring words. 9:14. Camera 1. The front exterior feed. Headlights swept across the driveway. A silver Audi. Tyler's car. Pulling in behind Coleman's vehicle. With the casual confidence of a son coming home to check on his father. He parked. The engine died. The driver's side door opened. Tyler stepped out carrying a paper bag from the restaurant on Peachtree Street, where we used to eat Sunday dinners when he was in high school. He was wearing a navy pullover and khakis. The uniform of a dutiful son arriving unannounced with comfort food and concern. His face, illuminated by the porch light, wore an expression of practiced worry that would have fooled anyone who was not watching from inside a federal surveillance van, with the knowledge that the man upstairs was already in position. He pulled out his phone. The ringtone echoed through the van's audio feed, half a second before Coleman's earpiece activated. Tyler's voice filled the confined space with a warmth that made my stomach turn. "Hey Dad, it is Tyler. I am outside. Brought you soup from Franklin's. That butternut squash you like. Gonna come in and check on you, okay?" Coleman's response was a masterpiece of vocal mimicry. A gruff, sleepy murmur that lasted exactly 4 words. Doors open. Come up. Tyler entered the house. Camera 4 tracked him through the foyer. He set the soup on the kitchen counter without looking at it. The gesture of a man completing a prop placement, rather than delivering a gift. Then he moved toward the stairs, with a pace that was slightly too quick for a concerned son, and slightly too measured for a panicked one. He climbed to the 2nd floor, and turned left toward the master bedroom. The audio feed captured everything with surgical clarity. Tyler's voice, low and controlled, speaking to a shadow that stood 3 feet from the bed where Coleman lay motionless under my duvet. "He is asleep. The pills I put in his bourbon at the office should still be working. Took them from Martin's supply. Midazolam. He will not wake up until it is over." A pause. The sound of Tyler's breathing. Steady and deliberate. "You have 10 minutes. Syringe is in your left pocket. Potassium chloride. It mimics cardiac arrest. By the time anyone finds him, it will look exactly like the chest pains he already reported. Not a pillow. Not a gun. A syringe." Martin's instruction to make it look medical had been translated into pharmaceutical precision. My son was not just coordinating a murder. He was narrating the medical examiner's future report with the clinical detachment of someone reading from a script that had been written, edited, and rehearsed. Does a heart break all at once, or does it fracture in stages, each revelation a new crack until the entire structure becomes dust? I watched Salco reach into his left pocket. His gloved hand emerged holding a small black case. He unzipped it with the care of a surgeon preparing an instrument, revealing a preloaded syringe that caught the blue television light like a needle of frozen mercury. Tyler stepped back toward the bedroom door. His silhouette filled the frame of camera 5. Backlit by the hallway light, watching Salco approach the bed. The way a project manager watches a contractor complete the final phase of a job that has run over budget and behind schedule. "Make it clean," Tyler whispered. "Then leave through the back. I will find him in the morning." Grieving son discovers father dead from heart failure. Martin handles the rest. Salco leaned over the bed. The syringe hovered above Coleman's arm, which lay deliberately exposed above the covers. The needle descended. Torres's voice cut through the van like a blade. "All units. Execute. Execute. Execute." And the night exploded. The house did not simply fill with agents. It detonated with them. Every door. Every window. Every entry point that Martin had so carefully left unlocked became a breach point for men in tactical gear who moved with the coordinated precision of a single organism with 12 arms. The master bedroom door crashed inward. Flashlights cut white surgical lines through the darkness. Coleman rolled off the bed in one fluid motion, his arm retracting from Salco's descending needle with the timing of a man who had rehearsed this exact second 100 times in his mind. Salco's reaction was instantaneous but futile. His body pivoted toward the nearest exit, a window he had likely already mapped as an emergency escape. But two agents were already there, their bodies filling the frame like a wall of black Kevlar. The syringe clattered against the hardwood floor, the potassium chloride inside catching the flashlight beams like liquid silver as it rolled beneath the bed. FBI. Do not move. Hands where I can see them. The words were shouted by three voices simultaneously, creating a wall of sound that left no room for negotiation or denial. Salco dropped to his knees, with the resigned compliance of a professional who understood that the game had changed faster than his reflexes could accommodate. The zip ties closed around his wrists, with a sharp plastic snap that sounded like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. But my eyes were not on Salco. They were on monitor 4. The hallway camera. Tyler. He had frozen at the bedroom door when the first flash of light erupted. For 1.7 seconds, his body was perfectly still, his face captured in the green-tinted clarity of the night vision feed, with an expression I will carry to my grave. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was the absolute vacancy of a man watching reality collapse around a narrative he had believed was airtight. The face of someone realizing that the floor beneath them was never there. Then he ran. Down the hallway. Toward the stairs. His feet pounding against the hardwood with the desperate rhythm of an animal fleeing a fire. It does not understand. Camera 2 tracked him descending the staircase, taking 3 steps at a time, his hand gripping the banister so hard the wood groaned. He reached the foyer. The front door was 6 feet away. 5, 4, 3 agents materialized from the living room like shadows given weight and authority. Tyler's momentum carried him into the first agent's chest, the collision producing a sound like a car door slamming shut. He went down hard, his shoulder hitting the marble floor with a crack that made me wince even through the monitor's tinny speakers. Do not resist. Hands behind your back. No, Tyler did not resist. His body went limp the moment the first hand touched his shoulder, as though some internal mechanism had finally released the tension that had been holding him upright for 18 months. He lay on the floor of my foyer, face pressed against the cold marble, his eyes open and staring at nothing, while the agent secured his wrists and read him his rights, in a voice that echoed through the empty house like a funeral prayer. Is there a sound lonelier than your own son being read his Miranda rights on the floor of the home you built for him? I gripped the edge of the bench until my knuckles turned white. Torres placed her hand on my shoulder. He is alive, she said. That is more than we could guarantee. An hour ago. She was right. Kane's deadline was Sunday. If this operation had failed, if Salco had succeeded, Tyler would have collected the insurance, paid Kane, and then what? Martin would have vanished to Cayman. Gloria would have vanished with him, and Tyler would have been left alone, holding a death certificate and a guilty conscience, with a criminal organization that would eventually demand more than money could buy. By failing tonight, Tyler had accidentally survived. The cage that was closing around him was also the only wall between him and the men who would have killed him next. Torres's radio crackled. A voice from the secondary team, positioned at Peachtree Tower, delivered a report in clipped federal cadence. Secondary target secured. 35th floor. Executive Office of Martin J. Cross. Target was operating a high-capacity document shredder when agents breached. Recovered items include partially destroyed financial ledgers, 3 prepaid cellular devices, and a leather travel bag containing 1 fraudulent passport under the name Michael Carraway and a printed boarding pass for Delta Flight 742 to Grand Cayman, departing 06:45 tomorrow. Martin had not even waited until morning to start destroying evidence. The moment his phone call to Salco was complete, he had returned to his office and begun feeding 25 years of paper trails into the teeth of a machine designed to make the past disappear. But the FBI had been faster. The shredder had consumed perhaps 30% of the documents before the door came down. Torres allowed herself a thin smile. He packed his escape bag before he even confirmed the kill. That tells you everything about his priorities. But the smile faded when the secondary team's leader came back on the radio with an addendum that changed the temperature of the entire operation. Target made a statement during arrest. Quote, "You have the puppets, but you do not have the woman who pulled every string." End quote. Target is requesting an attorney and refusing further comment. Torres looked at me. I looked at her. The word woman hung in the air between us, like a blade, suspended mid-fall. "What woman?" I asked. Torres was already reaching for her phone, pulling up a file I had not yet seen. "Martin has been communicating with a secondary party for 5 years. Encrypted channels. We have fragments, but no identification." She scrolled through intercepted messages. "The communications reference your son. They reference the trust fund. And they reference a familial connection to Tyler that predates your adoption." Familial connection. The phrase hit me like a fist wrapped in ice. I leaned forward, staring at the screen, as Torres enlarged a metadata tag attached to one of the encrypted messages. A surname used as a passphrase for the encryption key. Ward, the same surname as Denise. Tyler's biological mother. "He has a relative," I whispered. "Someone connected to Denise. Someone who has been involved in this from the beginning." Torres nodded, her jaw set. "And based on Martin's statement, she is not just involved. She is the architect. Martin may have built the machine, but this woman designed the blueprint." She reached for her desk phone. "I need to make a call. If there is a Ward family member in the system, we will find her before sunrise." I sat back in the surveillance van, the monitors still glowing with the aftermath of the raid. On screen 4, Tyler was being led out the front door in handcuffs, his head bowed, his navy pullover streaked with dust from the marble floor. On screen 1, Salco was being loaded into an armored transport. And somewhere in this city, a woman whose last name was Ward was watching the news and calculating her next move. The puppets were in cages. But the puppeteer was still holding the strings from somewhere in the dark. And she shared blood with the son I had just watched try to kill me. Torres placed a single photograph on the conference table. A woman, mid-50s, sharp cheekbones, copper-toned skin, hair pulled into a severe bun, eyes that carried the same quiet intensity I had seen once before in a 3-year-old boy sitting on a county shelter floor. "Gloria Ward," Torres said. "Age 55. Born in Macon, Georgia. Denise Ward's younger sister." I stared at the photograph. Tyler's biological aunt. The blood relative he never knew existed, or so I had believed until 72 hours ago. "She has 3 prior convictions," Torres continued, sliding a file across the table. "Wire fraud in Ohio, 2012. Identity theft in Florida, 2015. Insurance fraud in North Carolina, 2018. Every single target was a family connected to her by blood. Adoptive families. Foster families. People who took in her relatives' children." Torres paused. "People like you, Walt." The pattern was surgical. Gloria Ward did not rob strangers. She studied bloodlines the way cartographers study coastlines, searching for points of entry, calculating the tide. Her weapon was not a gun or a forged document. It was kinship. The word aunt. The word family. The emotional debt that orphaned children carry like stones in their pockets. 5 years ago, Torres said, she contacted Martin Cross. 5 years. While I hosted Thanksgiving dinners and signed Tyler's birthday cards and believed my empire was secure, Gloria Ward had been circling. She discovered Martin's embezzlement, the slow bleeding of Denise Ward's trust fund, and instead of reporting it, she made him an offer. $100,000 per year, Torres said. Silence money. She told Cross, "Pay me, or I tell Tyler everything about the trust." 5 payments. $500,000 total. Martin paid. Of course he paid. A man who had spent 25 years stealing from an orphan's inheritance would pay anything to keep that secret buried. But Gloria was not satisfied with blackmail. Blackmail was maintenance income. She wanted the principal. 2 years ago, she made direct contact with Tyler. I closed my eyes. 2 years. While Tyler grew distant, while he missed Sunday dinners, while his calls became shorter and his eyes became harder, Gloria Ward had been whispering. She told him she was his mother's sister, Torres said. Showed him documents, some real, some fabricated. Birth certificates. Hospital records from Denise's death. And then she told him the story she had constructed. The story was elegant in its cruelty. Gloria told Tyler that I had not rescued him, that I had purchased him, that Denise Ward's trust fund established through a wrongful death settlement worth $500,000 had been stolen by me and Martin together, that Catherine and I had used Tyler as a prop for social respectability while draining his inheritance. Every insecurity Tyler had ever carried, the questions about why his biological mother died, the quiet fear that he was a charity case, the distance he sometimes felt in rooms full of people who shared no blood with him. Gloria found those fractures and poured acid into each one. She designed the psychological roadmap, Torres said. Martin built the machine, but Gloria drew the blueprint. I thought of Tyler's face in the surveillance footage. The trembling hands. The soup he carried upstairs. He believed he was reclaiming something stolen. He believed the man sleeping in that bed had robbed him since birth. Gloria had given him a narrative so complete, so internally consistent, that no amount of fatherly love could penetrate it. The exit plan, I said. My voice was flat. Torres nodded. Delta Flight 742. Tomorrow morning. 6:45 departure to Grand Cayman. She placed 2 boarding passes on the table. Seat 14. A Michael Carraway. That's Martin's alias. Seat 14B, Margaret Collins. Margaret Collins. Gloria Ward's 12th identity. They were sitting together, side by side, flying into the Caribbean sunrise, while my son sat in a federal holding cell, charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Tyler would take the fall, Martin would take the money, and Gloria would take both the satisfaction of destroying the family that raised her sister's child and the financial reward of 25 years of patient hunting. We arrested her 40 minutes ago, Torres said. I looked up. Hartsfield Jackson. Concourse B. Gate 14. Torres allowed herself the smallest smile. She was carrying $47,000 in cash, 3 prepaid debit cards, and a burner phone. The phone contained one contact. Martin Cross. Gloria Ward, the architect, the puppeteer. The woman who had weaponized a dead sister's memory to destroy a living child was in federal custody. Her bags were in evidence. Her aliases were cataloged. Her flight was boarding without her, but I felt no relief. Because Tyler was still in an interrogation room 3 floors below us. And Tyler still believed Gloria was his savior. He still believed I was his thief. 2 years of carefully constructed lies do not dissolve because an arrest report is filed. Documents won't reach him, I said. Agents won't reach him. He's been conditioned to distrust authority. To distrust me, specifically. Torres studied me for a long moment. Then, you go in yourself. He tried to have me killed. He was manipulated into believing you deserved it. I stood. My knees ached. 63 years of building, protecting, enduring, and it came down to this. A walk down a hallway. A door. A chair across from my son. I had built Drummond Capital Partners from a single-room office on Peachtree Street. I had survived 3 recessions, Catherine's death, and a hired killer in my bedroom. But nothing in 63 years had prepared me for this. Sitting across from my son and proving that I loved him to a boy who had been taught, methodically and mercilessly, that my love was the greatest lie ever told. I buttoned my jacket, straightened my tie, and walked toward the elevator. The longest walk of my life was 3 floors down. The elevator descended 3 floors in 11 seconds. It felt like 11 years. I studied my reflection in the brushed steel doors. 63 years old. Gray at the temples. lines carved by decades of boardrooms and balance sheets, and burying a wife at 42. I looked like what I was, a man who had built something significant and was now watching it fracture from the inside. The doors opened. A corridor. Fluorescent lights humming at a frequency that made my teeth ache. Torres walked beside me, her heels clicking a rhythm that reminded me of a countdown. "Room 4B, she said. "He's been in there for 6 hours. Refused a lawyer. Refused water. Refused to speak to anyone." She stopped at the door. "He asked for one person." "Who?" "Gloria." "Of course." The woman who had poisoned him was the only one he trusted. The woman who had taught him to hate me was the only voice he wanted to hear. I understood then what I was walking into, not a conversation, but a deprogramming, and I had no training, no script, no guarantee. "You have as long as you need," Torres said. "The recording is running. If he confesses voluntarily, it helps his case. But Walt," she held my gaze, "if he shuts down, don't push. We can try again tomorrow." Tomorrow. As if there were infinite tomorrows. As if I had not already lost 30 years to silence and secrets. I opened the door. Tyler sat at a metal table, hands cuffed in front of him. Orange jumpsuit. His shoulders, the same shoulders I had watched broaden from a boy's frame into a man's, were curved inward, collapsed like a building whose foundation had been pulled away. He looked up, and for one moment, one fraction of a second, I saw the 3-year-old on the shelter floor. The boy who did not speak. The boy who watched the world from behind a wall of silence, waiting to see if the next adult would hurt him or leave him or both. Then the wall came down. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened into something I had never seen directed at me before. Hatred. Pure and practiced, and fed daily for 2 years by a woman who shared his blood. "I have nothing to say to you," Tyler said. I pulled out the chair. Sat down. Placed my hands flat on the table, open, visible, unarmed. The same posture I had used 30 years ago, on a shelter floor. "Then I'll talk," I said. "And when I'm done, if you still want me to leave, I'll leave." He said nothing, which was permission. "Gloria Ward," I began. "Arrested tonight at Hartsfield-Jackson. Concourse B. Gate 14. She was carrying $47,000 in cash, a passport under the name Margaret Collins, and a boarding pass for the same flight Martin Cross was taking to Grand Cayman." Tyler's jaw shifted. A micro-movement. He had not known about the shared flight. "She was leaving, Tyler. Tomorrow morning. 6:45. While you sat in this room charged with conspiracy to commit murder, Gloria Ward and Martin Cross were flying to the Caribbean together. Same flight. Seats 14A and 14B. I paused. Side by side. "You're lying." "I'm not." Torres can confirm. "The boarding passes are in evidence. 3 floors above us." His eyes flickered toward the door. Then back to me. The wall held, but I had seen the first crack. "Your mother," I said carefully, "was Denise Ward. She died in 1993. A wrongful death settlement was filed on your behalf. $500,000. Held in trust by my attorney, Martin Cross." I watched his face. "You know this part. Gloria told you. She told me you stole it. Martin stole it. Between 1995 and 2010, he withdrew funds annually, never more than $40,000 per year. By 2010, the trust was empty. I reached into my jacket and placed a single document on the table. This is the forensic audit, conducted by the FBI. Every withdrawal is documented. My name appears nowhere. Heidi. Tyler did not look at the paper. He looked at me. "Gloria told you I purchased you," I said. "That I used you. That the adoption was a transaction." My voice remained steady, but something beneath my ribs was breaking slowly, like ice cracking on a winter lake. "I understand why you believed her. She is your blood." And I swallowed. I am the man who chose you. And sometimes chosen feels less real than born. Silence. The fluorescent lights hummed their terrible frequency. I brought something else. I reached into my inner pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. Yellowed. Creased at the corners. A name written on the front in faded ink. For my baby, when he's old enough. Tyler's breathing changed. This was in your file at the Fulton County shelter, I said. Given to me the day I signed the adoption papers. Denise wrote it before she died. I was told to give it to you when you turned 18. I placed it on the table between us. I gave it to you on your 18th birthday. You read it. You cried. And then you put it in your desk drawer and never mentioned it again. His hands cuffed. Trembling moved toward the envelope. Stopped. Do you remember what it said? Tyler's voice came out fractured. Barely a whisper. She said. She said she chose someone to love me. She chose me, Tyler. Not Martin, not Gloria, me. I leaned forward. Your mother's last act on this earth was choosing the man who would raise her son, and I have spent 30 years trying to be worthy of that choice. The crack widened. I could see it in his eyes, the architecture of Gloria's lies beginning to shift. The foundation trembling. 2 years of conditioning, fighting against 30 years of memory. Sunday dinners. Baseball games. The night I held him through a thunderstorm when he was 7. And still afraid of noise. A tear fell onto the metal table. Then another. Tyler Drummond, my son, my boy. The child I had chosen and raised and loved imperfectly but completely, put his face in his cuffed hands and wept. I did not reach across the table. I did not speak. I simply sat present, patient, unmoving the same way I had sat on a shelter floor 30 years ago, waiting for a silent boy to decide I was safe. Some doors only open from the inside. Tyler cried for 4 minutes. I know because I counted every second on the clock mounted above the door, a habit from decades of boardrooms where silence cost money. In this room, silence cost nothing. It was the only currency I could offer. When he lifted his face, his eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, stripped of the armor Gloria had built around them. He looked young, impossibly young. Not 34, not a man who had conspired to murder his father. He looked like the boy who once asked me why other kids had mothers and he did not. Read it again, I said, nodding toward the envelope. His cuffed hands fumbled with the seal already broken, opened once on his 18th birthday in the study of our Buckhead home. Catherine's piano still in the corner, the smell of magnolia drifting through open windows. He unfolded the letter. Single page, blue ink. Denise Ward's handwriting small, careful, the penmanship of a woman who knew she was writing her last important thing. Tyler read aloud. His voice cracked on every third word, but he read, My beautiful boy. I am writing this because the doctors say, I won't see your first day of school. I won't see your graduation. I won't see you become the man I know you'll be. But I did one thing right. I found someone. His name is Walter Drummond. He came to the shelter on a Tuesday. He sat on the floor with you for 3 hours and didn't say a word. And you climbed into his lap. You never climb into anyone's lap. That's how I knew. He is not perfect. No one is. But he will love you the way I wish I could stay alive to love you. Let him. Please, baby. Let him. Tyler set the letter down. His fingers remained on the paper, pressing it flat against the metal table, as though anchoring himself to something real. She never mentioned Gloria. I said quietly. Not once. In all the shelter records, in all the social worker reports, Gloria Ward is absent. She did not visit. She did not write. She did not appear in your life until 2 years ago, when you became useful to her. Tyler's throat worked. She told me you hid this letter, that you kept it from me. You read it at 18. In my study. You cried then, too. I allowed myself a small, painful smile. You said, Dad, she sounds like she was smart. And I said she was smart enough to pick me. And you laughed. Something shifted behind his eyes. Memory fighting against fabrication. 30 years of lived experience, pressing against 2 years of manufactured rage. The trust fund, Tyler said. His voice was hoarse but steady now. Gloria said, "You and Martin, the FBI forensic audit is on this table. Every transaction is Martin's. Every withdrawal traces to accounts I had no access to and no knowledge of. Martin stole from you for 15 years. And when Gloria discovered it, she didn't protect you, she blackmailed him. 100,000 per year for 5 years. $500,000 in silence, money, paid from your stolen inheritance." Tyler stared at the document. I watched him read, watched his eyes move across columns of numbers, dates, account references, watched the final structure of Gloria's narrative collapse like a condemned building, imploding floor by floor. "She used Mom's name," Tyler whispered. "She said your mother would have wanted you to fight back. Your mother wanted you to let me love you." Those were her exact words. "They're on that paper in your hands." He was quiet for a long time. The clock above the door counted 60 seconds. 90. 120. "I almost killed you." The words fell out of him like stones dropping into still water. "I brought Salco into our house. I drugged your bourbon. I'd die." His voice broke again. "Dad, I almost. You were manipulated by 2 people who spent decades perfecting the art of destroying families." Gloria had 3 prior convictions, all targeting adoptive families through blood connections. Martin had 25 years of practice, hiding theft behind legal language. I leaned forward. "You are responsible for your choices. But you were not operating with true information. You were operating with a script, written by people who needed you to hate me." "I do not hate you." Tyler's voice was barely audible. "I never hated you. I hated what I thought you did." And it felt he swallowed. It felt real. Everything she said felt real. Because the best lies are built on real pain. You did lose your mother. You did grow up different from other children. Those feelings were real. Gloria just pointed them at the wrong target. Tyler looked at me. Directly. Without the wall. Without the rehearsed hostility. For the first time in 2 years, my son looked at me the way he had looked at me the morning of his Morehouse graduation, standing in his cap and gown, searching the crowd until he found my face, and then exhaling, as if finding me meant he could breathe. "What happens now?" he asked. "You cooperate fully. Torres will take your statement. You tell them everything. Every conversation with Gloria. Every instruction from Martin. Every dollar you owed. And to whom. Your cooperation significantly reduces your sentencing exposure. And us?" The question hung in the fluorescent air between us. And us. 2 words, carrying the weight of 30 years. "We rebuild," I said. "Not today. Not easily. But we rebuild." Tyler nodded. Slowly. Then he extended his cuffed hands across the table, not reaching for freedom, not reaching for the letter, but reaching for me. I took his hands. Held them the way I had held them on a courthouse step in 1993, small fingers wrapped inside mine, a judge's signature still wet on a document that made us family. Some bonds are not blood. They are choice. And choice, I have learned, is stronger than anything that runs through veins. Because choice must be renewed every single day. I chose Tyler at 3 years old. I chose him at 18. I chose him at 34, in an interrogation room, with his confession still wet on his lips. And finally, after 2 years of winter, he chose me back. The federal courtroom smelled of polished mahogany and recycled air. I had spent 40 years in rooms designed to project authority: boardrooms, conference halls, the executive suites of buildings I owned, but courtroom 3 of the Northern District of Georgia carried a different weight. Here, authority was not earned through quarterly profits or handshake deals. It was carved into the seal above Judge Morrison's bench. It was worn in the black robe. It was spoken in sentences that ended careers and erased futures. I sat in the second row, pressed suit, straight tie, hands folded in my lap. The same posture I had held in 1,000 meetings, but my hands had never trembled in those meetings. Martin Cross was brought in first. 25 years. I had known this man for 25 years. He had drafted my will. He had notarized Catherine's death certificate. He had sat across from me at Christmas dinners, poured my bourbon, clinked his glass against mine, and said, "To another good year, Walt." Every December, every year, while stealing from my son's trust fund, while preparing an exit strategy that required my death, he wore a gray suit, expensive, tailored, the kind I had once admired on him. But the man inside it had shrunk. His shoulders were narrower. His eyes, which had once projected competence and warmth, were flat, empty. The eyes of a man who had calculated every relationship in his life as a transaction and was now watching the final balance sheet collapse. Judge Morrison read the charges. Wire fraud, 18 counts. Embezzlement, 7 counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count. Money laundering, 4 counts. RICO violations, 2 counts. The numbers accumulated like a ledger of betrayal. Each count a year of friendship corrupted. A dinner poisoned in retrospect. A handshake revealed as a weapon. Martin's attorney entered a guilty plea. Negotiated. Reduced. The deal Torres had described to me weeks earlier. Full cooperation in exchange for a consolidated sentence. Martin James Cross, Judge Morrison said. This court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 15 years. Martin did not react. He stared forward at a point somewhere beyond the judge, beyond the courtroom, beyond the life he had built on other people's foundations. 2 federal marshals guided him from the room. He did not look at me. I was grateful for that. Gloria Ward entered next. She walked differently from Martin. Where he had shrunk, she expanded. Her chin was high. Her posture was deliberate, performative, even. She scanned the courtroom the way a predator surveys territory, cataloging faces, measuring threats. When her eyes found mine, she smiled. It was the cruelest expression I had ever seen on a human face. Not because of malice. Malice I could understand. It was cruel because of its intimacy. She smiled at me the way family smiles at family, as if we shared something, as if destroying my son was a private joke between relatives. I held her gaze. I did not look away. 63 years had taught me that silence could be a weapon, and I deployed it, now letting her smile fall into the void of my refusal to react. Judge Morrison read her charges. Wire fraud, 11 counts. Identity theft, 6 counts. Blackmail, 5 counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count. Criminal manipulation of a vulnerable adult, 3 counts. The prosecution had added that last category specifically for what she had done to Tyler. 2 years of psychological warfare against a man she targeted through biological connection. Gloria's attorney entered a plea of not guilty. A trial date was set. But Torres had already told me the outcome was certain, the evidence was overwhelming. Encrypted communications, financial records, Tyler's full testimony, the burner phone with Martin as sole contact, the boarding pass, the cash. 6 weeks later, the verdict came. Guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison sentenced Gloria Elaine Ward to 28 years in federal prison, the longest sentence of the 3. The architect received the heaviest punishment. Gloria did not smile when the sentence was read. For the first time since I had learned her name, her face showed something genuine fear. The fear of a woman who had spent her entire life escaping consequences and had finally run out of doors. Tyler's hearing was held separately. A Tuesday morning in October. The courtroom was smaller, less formal. A sentencing hearing rather than a trial, Tyler had pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges 3 months earlier, cooperating fully as Torres had outlined. I sat in the front row this time, close enough for Tyler to see me without searching. He entered in a Navy suit I had sent to the detention facility. Clean-shaven. Thinner than I remembered, but standing straight. When he saw me, he did not smile, but something in his posture softened. An exhale. The same exhale from his graduation morning. His attorney presented mitigating factors. 30 years of clean record. Full cooperation with federal investigation. Testimony that directly led to the conviction of Martin Cross and Gloria Ward. Evidence of sustained psychological manipulation by 2 individuals with documented histories of predatory behavior. Letters of character reference, including one from me. I had written that letter at 3 in the morning, sitting at Catherine's piano. It took 11 drafts. How do you tell a judge that the man who conspired to kill you is also the boy who once climbed into your lap on a shelter floor and fell asleep? How do you quantify the distance between manipulation and choice, between victim and perpetrator, between the son you raised and the weapon someone made of him? I wrote the truth. Tyler Drummond is my son. He was used as a tool by people, more powerful and more practiced in cruelty than he could recognize. He is responsible for his actions, but responsibility and irredeemability are not the same thing. Judge Morrison considered the factors. The courtroom was silent for what felt like a full minute. Tyler James Drummond. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. Contingent on continued cooperation and completion of a court-mandated psychological rehabilitation program. 8 years. Tyler closed his eyes, nodded once, accepted. Before the marshals escorted him out, he turned toward the gallery, found my face, and mouthed 2 words I had waited 2 years to see on his lips. Thank you. Not I'm sorry. Not forgive me. Thank you. Because sorry looks backward, and Tyler, for the first time in years, was looking forward, toward something that could be built, rather than something that had been destroyed. I nodded. Once. The way fathers nod at sons across distances too large for voices to carry. The marshals led him through the side door. The courtroom emptied, and I remained seated in the front row of a federal courthouse, listening to the echo of justice, settling like ash after a fire. Ash is what remains when everything false has burned away. And from ash, if you are patient, if you are stubborn enough to believe in growth, something new can root. 6 months later, the magnolias bloomed. I noticed them on a Wednesday morning walking from my car to the Peachtree Tower lobby, the same path I had taken 10,000 times before. But that Wednesday, I stopped, stood beneath the canopy of white petals and breathed. The scent was thick, sweet, almost unbearable in its gentleness. Catherine had loved magnolias. She said they were proof that beautiful things could grow in southern heat, that pressure and warmth, applied long enough, produced something worth stopping for. I had not stopped for anything in 40 years. I was stopping now. The building looked the same. 50 floors of glass and steel. My name etched into the lobby directory. But the man who entered it each morning was different. Lighter in some places, heavier in others. Grief does that, it redistributes weight rather than removing it. You do not become less after loss. You become differently shaped. The Denise Ward Foundation launched in January. I named it quietly. No press conference. No ribbon cutting. A simple filing with the Georgia Secretary of State. A website built by a 23-year-old designer Tyler had mentored at Morehouse before everything collapsed. And a mission statement I wrote myself, providing educational scholarships and transitional support to children aging out of Georgia's foster care system, because every child deserves someone who chooses them. The initial endowment was $500,000. The exact amount Denise Ward's trust had once held, the amount Martin Cross stole over 15 years. I could not return what was taken, but I could rebuild its ghost into something that breathed. Torres called me The day the Foundation's 501c3 status was approved. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. Most people in your position would have walked away, changed the locks, moved on. Most people in my position didn't sit on a shelter floor for 3 hours waiting for a 3-year-old to trust them." She laughed. It was the first time I had heard Rachel Torres laugh. It sounded like relief. The Hank Henderson Veterans Recovery Program opened in March, a partnership with Emory Healthcare and the Atlanta VA Medical Center. Residential treatment for veterans suffering from PTSD, substance abuse, and suicidal ideation. 20 beds. Full funding for 3 years. A waiting list that filled within 48 hours of announcement. Hank stood beside me at the dedication ceremony. He wore a new suit, the first suit I had ever seen him in. His hands, still calloused from 30 years of pushing mop buckets and emptying trash cans, held a pair of scissors poised above a red ribbon. "You sure about this?" he asked. "My name on a building? Your name saved my life, Hank. The least it can do is save a few more." He cut the ribbon. The small crowd applauded. Hank looked at me, and for one moment, I saw the man in the basement again. The man with the revolver and the empty eyes. That man was gone now, replaced by someone who stood in sunlight and cut ribbons and let his name mean something beyond survival. After the ceremony, Hank pulled me aside, pressed a pack of menthol cigarettes into my hand. "What's this?" I asked. "Every Monday for 7 years, you left these on my shelf." Never said a word. He closed my fingers around the pack. "My turn now. Every Monday. Your desk. Until one of us runs out of Mondays." I laughed. It hurt and healed in equal measure. Tyler wrote his first letter in April. Federal Correctional Institution, Jessup, Georgia. Return address printed in careful block letters, the same handwriting I had watched, developed from a child's scrawl to a man's signature across report cards, college applications, and eventually documents I wished he had never signed. The letter was short. 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No elaborate apologies. Just this. "Dad, I started the rehabilitation program last month. Cognitive behavioral therapy. 3 sessions per week. The counselor says I have to identify the moments I chose to believe Gloria over my own memory. There are more moments than I want to admit, but I am identifying them. One by one. Like pulling weeds from a garden, I let go wild. I read Mom's letter every night. Denise's letter, I mean. The one she wrote for me. I keep it under my pillow like a kid. Maybe that's what I need to be for a while. A kid who still believes his mother chose well. I am not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. But I want you to know, I am trying to become someone worth forgiving." I read that letter 7 times. Then I folded it into my jacket pocket, the same pocket where Denise's original letter had lived for 30 years, and I carried it with me to work, to dinner, to bed. I carried it until the creases softened and the ink began to fade. And then I placed it in my desk drawer beside its oldest companion. 2 letters. 2 generations of Ward Drummond words. One written by a dying mother, choosing trust. One written by a living son, choosing repair. I visit Tyler on the first Sunday of every month. The drive to Jessup takes 4 hours. I leave at dawn. The Georgia highway unspools beneath my tires like a ribbon of second chances, pine trees, red clay, morning fog lifting from fields that have known 100 seasons of burning and regrowth. We sit across a metal table. Different from the interrogation room, this one has vending machines and families, and a guard who nods at me like I am ordinary. And perhaps I am. Perhaps that is the final lesson of 63 years. That extraordinary pain eventually resolves into ordinary love. That empires are not built from steel and glass, but from the stubborn, unglamorous decision to show up. Again. And again. And again. Tyler is different each visit. Clearer. Calmer. Last month, he told me about a woodworking class. He is building a bookshelf. Measuring twice. cutting once. Learning patience with his hands, the way I once learned patience with my heart. When I get out, he said last Sunday, I want to work with the foundation. Denise's foundation. If you'll let me. It's your mother's name on the door, I said. It's been waiting for you. He smiled. Not the performative smile of the man Gloria had manufactured. A real smile. Small, uncertain. The smile of someone rebuilding himself board by board. The way he builds that bookshelf measuring twice. Cutting once. Trusting that the structure will hold. I am 63 years old. I have built a company worth $200 million. I have buried a wife. I have survived a hired killer in my bedroom, a 25-year betrayal by my closest friend, and a conspiracy designed by a woman who weaponized motherhood itself. But the thing I am proudest of cannot be measured in dollars or court verdicts or foundation endowments. It is this. I sat on a floor in 1993 and waited for a silent boy to trust me. And 30 years later, after fire, after ash, after everything burned that could burn, he trusted me again. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. If you are watching this, and you have someone in your life who chose you, not by blood, but by decision, call them. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. Because choosing someone is the bravest act a human being can perform, and being chosen is the greatest gift a human being can receive. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Walter Drummond, and I am still here.